Well, this week marks 100 days since France got its newest prime minister. Gabriel Attal is the youngest prime minister the country has ever seen. He was also previously the country's education minister, and we're going to use the occasion to take a closer look at France's flailing public school system. It's been filled with strikes and teacherless classrooms. Now, one of the first pledges Attal made when he was education minister last fall was to place teachers in front of students this academic year, a promise that has so far gone unfulfilled. Delanda D'Souza takes a closer look.
There were high expectations at the start of the academic year in France. The education minister at the time, now the prime minister, promised all schools in the country would be fully staffed.
From the new school year, there will be one teacher in front of each student. We're prepared.
But Gabriel Attal's lofty promises have remained just that. For years, the French education system has been struggling with staffing shortages, frustrating parents, teachers and students alike. At this school in the city of Toulouse, parents attach ribbons to the gates, symbolizing each day each child isn't taught.
It impacts their learning, the atmosphere at school, inside the household. We're all starting to get worried.
In January, France's new prime minister named Amélie Oudéa-Castéra as his replacement in the education ministry. But her appointment quickly caused a storm after she defended her decision to send her children to private school. After protesting over pay and working conditions, the new nomination was yet another reason for teachers to take to the streets. They allege the government's planned reforms for the next academic year, which includes experimenting with uniforms, drama classes and learning the national anthem, don't meet their pressing needs.
There
are a lot of positions that are unfilled. There's a crisis in the sector. It's harder for children to concentrate. We have interesting suggestions to provide, but the problem is we aren't listened to.
Oudéa-Castéra lasted in her role as education minister for exactly a month. With staffing shortages in French schools still an issue, the government recently announced measures to simplify requirements for teacher training.
The ultimate goal when this plan is in place is to provide better training, anticipate what the country needs, and recruit as many people as possible right after high school, reducing the need to recruit contract workers.
Last week, the French state was condemned by a court for hours of lost learning by students in Versailles. And while the €150 awarded to each plaintiff was largely symbolic, it's an acknowledgement of the state's failure. Each year, 15 million hours of teaching are lost in France due to a school's inability to find a substitute.
We're going to talk more about this now with Saskya Vandoorn, who joins me on the set. Saskya, welcome. Now, you're a journalist based here in Paris. You're also a mom of three with two kids in the French public school system. But things were so bad in your own school in Paris that you actually took matters into your own hands. Tell me about that.
Yeah, well, let me tell you about the beginning of the year, because that's when it all started. We had 4 teachers for 100 children. Then a few weeks in, one of the teachers was so burnt out that she just left from one day to the next. And then there was another teacher who went on sick leave. So we were down to 2 teachers. Now, we thought that the Board of Education, the Rectorat, would send 2 substitute teachers in their place. That did not happen. So suddenly we were faced with 2 teachers for 100 children. And that's when parents decided not to send their kids to school. They were worried. They thought there would be safety issues. There's a lot of children for just 2 teachers. And so we started, aggressively sending emails to the Board of Education, asking them to find a solution. Now, we even got our local MP involved. We got the mayor involved, but we still heard nothing from the Board of Education. And that's when we decided that we as parents really needed to take matters into our own hands and try and kind of shine a spotlight on our tiny school.
Which we can see you did. I mean, that's you yourself in front of the school teaching, isn't it?
Exactly. So there I am with my 8-month-old baby in my arms, and we're teaching the children in front of the school. And what we were trying to do was kind of stage, I guess, a mini protest. And this video, this image really did speak to people because we suddenly got a lot of media coverage following this. And after that, several days after that, we got magically 2 substitute teachers came, and they will be with us until the end of the year. So a happy ending for us. The parents are pleased, but I can't help but think that somewhere there is a school that now is, 2 substitute teachers less, and they haven't benefited from the coverage that we got. and will be struggling with the school year.
And what's the situation like in the classroom for what you've been able to observe with these new substitute teachers? I mean, what's the feeling you're getting from the teachers and the kids?
Well, I think it's hard. There's always an adjustment period. And because there were so many weeks, months, where the children didn't have any teachers, and we're talking about a maternelle, a kindergarten, so the kids are aged between 3 to 5. That age group, they really crave stability. That's what they need. They need familiar faces. You want them to be excited about school. It's their first year of school. It's their entry into education. And I think that what I saw anyway with the children was a kind of unwillingness to go to school. And I think still now they're getting to know the substitute teachers. But a lot of this has been rushed because there is this huge shortage of substitute teachers in France, and it's something that I truly hope the government will try and focus on, because it's really a fundamental human right.
It absolutely is. And Saskya, thank you so much for sharing your experience with us here on France 24. Stay with me. We're going to get a bit more analysis now with Paul Smith. Paul's the head of French and Francophone studies at the University of Nottingham. Paul, why has there been such a big problem recruiting not just substitute teachers, but just regular teachers in France?
Well, I think that one of the underlying long-term problems is that the value of teachers in France has deteriorated over the last 20, 30 years. It's no longer an attractive profession for young people going in. I mean, there's an enormous problem of candidates. It's not just a question of recruiting teachers in the first place. It's a question of getting candidates who are actually sitting the teacher training exams and then getting them into the system.
And there are so many teachers who are actually leaving the profession as well. As you said, France is a country that loves education. I mean, every year this is a country that tells us what's on the philosophy end-of-year exam. When did teaching and how did teaching become so undermined in France?
It's difficult to say. I think most Western societies saw a turn, let's say towards the end of the 20th into the early 20th century, when it no longer became, there was no longer, people no longer questioned the system. And that became the moment where people began to challenge what teachers were teaching. And we've seen that in a lot of different ways, of course, in France, which probably we won't go into today. But that kind of leads on to a deterioration in the prestige of teaching. We've seen it here in the UK, and we've certainly seen it in other countries, and France is no different. And I think that a lot of other decisions have been made. For example, Macron, when he first became president, said he wanted to cut back on the number of fonctionnaires, number of state employees. That includes teachers and administrators. And so by trying to cut back after you had people leaving the profession, actually, there was no money to recruit new teachers. And as Saskya was kind of alluding to, the education is like a tanker. You can't turn it, it's not an agile thing. You can't turn it around quickly. So those long decisions that are made past are kind of coming home to roost now.
Indeed. We don't have a lot of time left, Paul, but just to wrap up, what about these solutions that the government is trying to come up with now? Do you think anything will stick? Anything will be able to turn this boat around?
Well, I don't think uniforms are the solution. I mean, and the national anthem. What is really needed is a revaloration and thinking about salaries. Young people who get to the end of a 2-year master's and are thinking about going to teaching are attracted to other professions. The levels of remuneration in France when you're a teacher are ridiculous in comparison compared to Germany. And your starting salaries are so low. And that's really the bottom line.
It is. Paul, thanks so much for sharing your expertise with us. And Saskya, again, thank you for coming in and telling us about your story. Thanks to all of you for watching France 24. Do stay with us. There's a lot more to come.